Hello and welcome to Parenting SOS. Happy Mum, Happy Baby is all about having the conversations that really matter when it comes to being a parent. The highs, the lows, and every muddy, messy thing in between. But we also know that seeking support and advice around parenting isn't always easy. And that's where Parenting SOS comes in. Today, we are exploring speech therapy. Now, learning to communicate and express yourself isn't something that comes naturally to all children, and it can be difficult to know what to do if you feel like your child is falling behind. Emma Pomroy is a paediatric speech and language therapist and the founder of Southwest Speech Therapy. Emma is passionate about enabling parents and families with the tools to make all children confident and competent communicators, and I'm so pleased to be speaking with her today. Emma, welcome to Happy Mum, Happy Baby.
Hi.
I mean, it's a mouthful, which I always find quite interesting when we're talking about speech.
It's a bit mean of us sometimes, I think, actually. We make it more complicated than it needs to be.
Well, it's like the word dyslexic. It feels like a cruel trick.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. How are you?
Good. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, how did you find yourself in this area?
So, I always wanted to do something that was people related.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was always a very caring child. I had a little sister. I was always looking after her, playing with her, and doing that kind of classic thing that you do when you're a teenager and you're trying to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I really luckily got to go and do work experience at a brain injury rehabilitation centre for children with acquired brain injuries. So I got to see all these different professions. I saw specialist teachers, doctors, physios, occupational therapists, speech therapists. And the thing that I loved about speech therapy is it was helping children tell someone they love them, tell someone they were in pain. And there's nothing more important than being able to communicate and tell people those things that are important to you. And also they got to play all day. So I thought this is just the right job for me to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What is considered normal when it comes to children and communication?
Yeah, I think that's a big question, isn't it? When we think about speech and language therapy, we think about not just output. So I think that's the thing that parents are really looking for. They're looking for babbling, they're looking for first words, but we are also thinking about attention listening skills. So how long children are staying with activities for, their ability to shift attention, to share something with us by looking over at us and then looking back and at an activity. We're looking at play skills, so children engaging with a variety of different toys and playing in lots of different ways. And then we're also looking at social interaction. Them engaging with us, turn-taking, eye contact, copying us, that's a big one. And then their understanding of language and their use of language and speech sounds. So the kind of big things that parents often will look for is babbling. We're expecting babbling around 4 to 6 months. First words come around 1. Yeah. And then putting 2 words together comes around 2. Yeah. But there's so much more than just those skills. So I can go into them, but there's so many more things other than just those skills that we're looking at.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because every child is different. So thinking about what is normal is such a, and also I think when it comes to speech, you can't help but compare to other children. I can remember looking at videos of like, this child was doing that by this age and this child's not. You know, my second was really physically able. So it felt like his brain was engaged in getting the physical stuff done. He knew how to communicate with us, and he knew how to get what he wanted. He was a very direct child, still is. But the language, it felt like we got a few words, like I think we got to about 10, 20 words by about 16 months, and then it stopped. Like it didn't progress for a month. And I can remember him having his 2-year check and that sort of being flagged as a sort of delayed talker and being like, wow, that's, I wouldn't have even thought that because the person that's with them all the time knows what they mean, And then with my third, I was saying to you earlier, he does have a speech therapist or did have a speech therapist because he had a backing disorder. And it's really interesting, though, to see who flags those things because when you're there with them all the time, you understand them in a way that other people don't. It is actually that weird thing when you're with someone else and you're going, oh, you don't understand what you just said there.
I'm also always amazed by the children who maybe aren't saying as many words as we'd expect. So your second child, you said, who was flagged at the 2-year check. So that's the time we're expecting sort of 2 words together, little phrases, little sentences, and sort of 50 plus words at that point. But I'm always amazed by children's ability to express themselves even when they don't have the words.
Because a massive part of language isn't verbal.
Absolutely. And it's just, they're always grabbing you by the hand, taking you to things, gesturing, showing you.
They can communicate in other ways.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing also for parents to kind of take note of. You might be really worried about how many words your child is saying, but it's also important to kind of acknowledge and celebrate those other ways that they're communicating and track and measure that as well, so that when you have those conversations, you can say, they maybe don't have this many words right now, but they are able to express their wants, their needs, the things that are important to them, because that's really what we want for children, isn't it? To be able to communicate their wants and needs and how they're feeling and what they're thinking. Yeah,
and I just think it must be so frustrating for children when they can't communicate what they want.
Yeah.
I mean, I had hearing difficulties as a kid, and I was a devil child, my mum would tell me.
It's, I mean, pretty much every conversation I have with a new parent, we always talk about behaviour, tantrums, meltdowns. We always talk about it. It always comes up. And I always say, okay, are we biting, kicking, hitting? What's happening? To let parents know, I'm expecting that.
Yes.
Highly likely to be happening.
Yes.
Don't be afraid if that is what's going on.
Because instantly you're kind of going, this is my normal.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. This is normal for me.
Yeah. And we're going to get through it. We're going to help them and reduce that frustration for them.
Yeah. So what is speech therapy and how does it work?
So we look at all those areas.
Yes.
It's, attention listening, understanding of language, social interaction and play, use of language and speech sounds. And we separate language and speech into kind of 2 different areas. So language is more the vocabulary, the sentence structure, the grammar. And sounds, speech, is more just the sounds and the movements of the mouth. And then we also have a role in eating and drinking as well. That's a more specialist area, which I don't personally work in that area. But because we do all the anatomy of the sort of mouth and throat, the same muscles are involved with eating and drinking. So we have a role there. And speech therapists work from beginning of life all the way up until end of life.
Right.
But obviously today we're thinking about little ones. Yeah. And then in terms of how it works, so kind of it varies depending on maybe if you're doing the NHS approach or if you're looking privately, but broadly what will happen is there'll be an assessment of whether what your child is doing is following the typical developmental trajectory. If it's not, and then assessment would be warranted, and then there'll be some kind of assessment process. Again, varies depending on what sort of route you're going down. That might be parent interview, that might be observation, that might be seeing your child, playing with them, asking them some questions. Also depends on their age. And then from that, we pull out which areas are exactly where they should be, which areas are they really great at, and what things are hard for them. And then a therapy plan is developed and targets are set based around that jointly with parents. And it might be, particularly in the NHS, because parents are the ones that are with children every single day, there is a big, and this is the right thing to do, this is brilliant, there's a lot of support around helping parents help their child.
Right.
So that's a big part often of the initial package is around parent support and parent groups and, training parents to be able to make little adjustments and tweaks to support their child. And then there might be direct work with your child themselves.
Yeah, I remember with Max, it felt like a lot of his sessions were very, all games.
Yeah.
He absolutely loved them. And then just picking up like little bits that we could help him at home, because it isn't enough to have those like little sessions once a week. It's that work that you do to continue it.
Yeah, which I think is a lot of pressure actually to put on parents. And that's something which I'm really aware of, that you're already feeling pressure. You already want to help your child.
Yeah.
And one of the main things I want people to come away from today is that you are your child's most powerful teacher, and that's amazing. It's not your responsibility. It's our responsibility to help you and guide you as the professionals. This is our area of expertise, but you are your child's best teacher. You know them the best, and to feel, rather than pressure, to feel empowered that you have that ability. You can teach them in a way that I can never teach them. You're their favourite person. It's true.
I like this. But sometimes it is, I've found it, I guess, on a personal level, sometimes when it's a long day and that's the last thing the kid wants to engage with you, you know, then it can feel like a bit of a pressure. But it is, I guess it's about taking that pressure away and kind of making sure it stays fun.
Yeah, and just play.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something which is important. I think we'll probably come on to it, but to raise that with your therapist as well,
Yeah,
you know.
just sort of be very honest about it.
They've got a busy day.
Yeah.
And like, how can we, it's not practical to kind of go and sit down and drill them.
Yeah.
You know, how can we do it in a way that's not like that makes it just slot into the routine?
Yeah. So you talked about, you know, highlighting those behaviours that you might see. Do those occur in the room as well?
In therapy, sometimes it kind of depends on what's happening. I mean, some children, they kind of got this level of frustration, not continually, but it can be there a lot, and so it can definitely happen while I'm there. Hard, but often I don't want to put them in a situation where they're having to do that, but it's helpful if I see it.
Yeah.
It's really helpful because then we can be as a team, me and the parents, we can work through it together. Whereas if they're, you know, brilliant and everything's really easy for them when they're with me, I'm not there for the easy stuff. I'm there for the stuff that's hard. Yeah. So I want to see what is hard.
But that's hard as a parent, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that that behaviour's okay in that room. You know, it's kind of, because everything in your body is kind of going, oh, no.
Yeah.
I don't want someone else to see you like this. I don't, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think to be reassured, there's probably been, you know, multiple other children that day who have had something like that and maybe 100 times more extreme than that in that room. So we're not scared by it. We're not freaked out by it. It's a place where they can be however they need to be in that moment and feel safe to be like that. And that is actually a big part of therapy, of children feeling really safe with us, to be able to show us that side of them, that they're really cross and they're really frustrated and things are hard, and we're there to help.
It's really reassuring to hear that.
Yeah.
Do you think it takes a lot for parents to admit that there might be something going on with speech and language?
I think it really varies. For me personally, because I work independently, parents are actively choosing to come to me.
Right.
So it's a bit different. When I have my NHS hat on, I don't work in the NHS anymore, but I did. They might be in your room because someone a teacher maybe has said, I think you should go.
Yeah.
And sometimes in those situations, parents they're not seeing the same things. They don't perhaps know if what they're doing is typical. They're not so worried about it. So then it's a conversation around, what would we expect? What can we see here?
Yeah.
There's also often a discrepancy between what happens at home and what happens at nursery or what happens at school.
Really?
Yeah, it's really common.
Yeah.
Your child might be able to do all these amazing things at home, and then when they go to nursery, they're completely closed off, they're in their own world, they're not wanting to talk. So it might get flagged at nursery, but you might not be seeing any of that at home. So that's often a big part of that initial conversation and again, it's parents really need to trust us as well as professionals. So we need to make them feel safe, that I'm going to be really honest with you about the stuff that's hard for your child, and also I'm going to be their cheerleader. You can trust that I'm going to champion what they're amazing at as well. Yeah. But we need to talk about what's difficult for them so that we can help them with that stuff.
Do you think there's a bit of a stigma about asking for help?
Yeah. In a word. I think there can be. I think there's a lot of pressure, isn't there? And it's so hard because I love my female friend. I love women, but women can be really spiky towards other women, can't they? Yeah. And I think there can be a lot of judgment. You know, is your child doing this? I mean, often when I speak to parents, I'll say, I've gone into that nursery 3 times this week. Your child is not the only child that I'm there to see. I'm not the only professional that's going in. Yeah. So I think that can be helpful to know that, you know, there's lots of children that need help. I mean, it's 1 in 5 children that need support at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's lots of children that need help at the moment.
I can remember when it got flagged to us with my youngest about him having this backing disorder. Though it wasn't said backing disorder, the nursery, the staff member just said, I think he, you know, could benefit from seeing a speech therapist. And I'm being quite sort of confused by it. Like, I had a speech therapist growing up. I couldn't hear, and being a bit like, but then also realising that in terms of where they are at school, he's the youngest baby, he's the youngest child in the class. And also, I think part of that, he's the youngest in the family, youngest in the class. I was a bit, not dismissive of it, but kind of like, really? But then also realising that because he's the youngest, when he goes into reception in year 1 and starts reading, I didn't want him to be behind because he didn't know that a k is not a g, and having that back and in front and stuff. So I did understand that actually getting on top of it early, for want of a better phrase, was really important.
I mean, that's definitely, the evidence tells us there's an age when they're too little for you to be, putting extra stuff into their world. But the earlier the better, really. And sometimes what that can look like is just little tweaks that parents, they might already be doing those things, but little tweaks. So that can be therapy, can be those small tweaks that you're doing day to day. But yeah, definitely early. And because as they get older, the academic demands increase, their diaries get busier, and the curriculum is delivered through language. The way we teach is by using language. So if language is hard for you and communication is hard for you, then potentially the classroom is going to be a difficult environment for you. So yeah, the earlier you can, nursery age, definitely.
Okay, Emma, so on Parenting SOS, we ask you to come in with your top 3 most asked questions. Okay, so number 1 is, what can I do to support my child's speech and language skills?
So the first one is using verbal routines. So when you're getting your child ready in the morning, using the same language every single time. So trousers on, T-shirt on, let's get ready, let's go. Using the same language. Sorry, I can't turn off my therapist voice.
I quite like it. I'm in the room. I like it.
So that then the benefit of that is you're exposing them to the same vocabulary. So they're attaching that vocabulary to meaning because you're using it in context. But also it helps children anticipate what's coming next.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can end up using so much language, not intentionally, just is coming out of us, and children don't really know where to start, and it's a bit confusing for them. So using the same language all the time helps children understand what's coming, helps them prepare, plan for what's coming next. And it also gives them the opportunity, once you've done it a few times, you can maybe pause. So you can have trousers on, T-shirt on, let's get ready, let's, and then they can fill in, go, and then you've got a lovely little moment with you and them. The next thing is when we're then down kind of maybe having breakfast, thinking about using visual choices. So this would be holding up 2 options for your child. So would you like orange juice or would you like milk? Would you like toast? You could hold up the bread. Would you like toast or cereal? So giving them the opportunity, even if they don't yet have the language, they can make a choice and have some ownership over what's happening. Yeah. Because also, how else then, if they don't have the words, how are they supposed to tell you, Mum, I don't want that right now. I fancy this instead. And then my next strategy is to, on the time when you go for a walk to nursery or just when you're going out to the park, to comment on things using your senses. I think we'll often point out, oh, look, there's a bus, or, oh, there's a tree, or there's a bird. But actually, we've got the consistent language from the morning routine. Yeah. And now it's an opportunity to expose your child to different vocabulary. So you could say, I can feel the wind brushing against my cheek, or I can hear the bird squeaking. Or so picking a sense and then commenting using different senses on your walk to nursery. Yeah.
I can remember when I first started filming the Baby Club, actually, because we did a bit of training beforehand. And one of the practitioners saying that with studies that they had found, some parents kind of forget that their babies can hear. That they can talk to their babies, and that's actually a massive part of them starting to understand the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what we should be doing is, chatting to them, commenting on things around them, exposing them to all that language. Yeah. And the kind of sort of thread through all of these strategies is making it relevant to what's happening in that moment, in the here and now. As children get older, we can talk about things in the future and in the past. And there's no reason why you can't still talk about some of that stuff. But to expand children's language and to help them understand, we need to be talking about what's happening right now. So talking about a bus when they can't see it is maybe a bit confusing. Whereas while a bus is going past, say, oh, it's so loud. Yeah. See the wheels spinning. Yeah. commenting in that way, you can then attach the word spinning to what it actually means because you can see it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that does make perfect sense.
So the next strategy is during playtime. So I call this the 3 L's of play.
Yeah.
Level, lead, and label. So the first one is getting down at your child's level while you're playing. And this is a tip really thinking about the social interaction side of kind of facial expression, but also how we make sounds. Allowing your child to see your mouth and seeing how you're making those sounds. So down at their level so they can see what's going on. Following their lead within play. I think as adults, it's really hard for us to play.
Yeah.
We lose that skill of how to play. I actually remember the day I couldn't play anymore as a child. Yeah, I remember I went to secondary school. I came home and I wanted to play with my sister. And I remember I can't do it anymore. I mean, it's all very different now.
I can remember at 13 coming home from school, getting my Barbies out and being like...
It was Barbies for me too.
How funny.
Yeah. And I remember this feeling of sadness around it as well. I just couldn't do it anymore. Yes. It's gone. It's not the same anymore. Yeah. And I think it's really hard for us as adults to get into that childlike mindset and be able to play. So actually take the pressure off you and just follow what your child's interested in. If your child is organising their toys, join in with that. If your child is playing Barbies and they're brushing their hair or whatever, join in with that. So follow your child's interests and lead. And then label. Again, it's that commenting on what's happening whilst they're playing. So if they are brushing their hair, you can say brushing hair, pushing car. Thinking about how much language we're using. If your child is not talking or has only a few words, don't be using great big long sentences at this point. It's too much language for them. So pick 1 to 2 words max in a little phrase. If they're using 2 to 3 word phrases and sentences, then you can go for sentences. So just kind of keeping it within where they're at that point in time. Yeah. And then the final one is around reading a story with your child. Reading is so brilliant for children's language development. There's the phonological awareness skill, the kind of listening skill around rhythm and rhyme, which is amazing. There's the vocabulary development that we get from stories. They're also so lovely for connecting with your child. That just gorgeous moment where the both of you are there and you're sharing a book together, which again is brilliant for attention skills. Another one that we want to work on as therapists, that sharing an activity together, both looking at that and sharing that. But lots of children can't attend to a full book. It can be too much for them. So again, take the pressure off and just label things that you see. Just point to them and comment on what you can see. Oh, there's a duck. Oh, there's a slide. Turn the page and just label. And you can work up to reading the story fully. But just having that other way of reading, I think a lot of parents feel pressure that they have to read the book properly, and if they can't do it, then we'll just give up with it. But just being able to be more flexible.
It's quite a nice way, actually, of going to the same book that you might have read a few times and spinning it. So you're looking at a different thing. Maybe you're looking at pictures and seeing what's going on rather than, just a different view of the same book, essentially. Yeah.
And I still love fully reading the book. Maybe that's part of your bedtime routine. Yeah. That's lovely. But also just commenting and labelling what you can see as well is another way of, you're just giving your child opportunity to hear loads and loads of language attached to meaning multiple times throughout the day.
Yeah. Is it difficult for parents to differentiate between a child who might need to see a speech therapist and who might be neurodiverse? Is that something that comes up a lot?
Yes. Well, it really varies, actually. Yeah. I have some parents who I see who are so clued into everything. They're really aware, and they're often the parents who they've come to me, they've done their kind of research before they come to see me, and they tell me that I think my child is autistic, I think they're processing language in a different way, I think we need to think about these things for the future, and they're really on it. And then there are other parents who maybe their child had hearing loss. Yeah. And so they think maybe the speech is related, or the lack of talking is related to the hearing loss. And then we can see those other signs of neurodiversity in there. It doesn't mean that there can't be just a speech and language delay as well as that, but they might not be attributing it to that. So, I think it can be difficult to untangle. Yeah. Yeah.
This is one thing that came up that I found really fascinating. Why is not getting stuck on just questions important? Because I know, the pickup is one of those times where I definitely just ask questions and everyone's like, meh, how's your day? Good. What did you eat? Can't remember. Who did you play with? No one. No one really wants to, give me the lowdown on their day. Yeah. So why, what is it about questions that's just well, just not the best form of communication.
So I'll come back to that specific example.
Yeah.
But if I see it all the time, particularly if you're a little bit worried about how many words your child has, you kind of accidentally sort of testing, like, show me that you know this. What's this? What do they say? What do they do? And the difficulty with that is the way we learn language is through hearing it.
Yeah.
If I'm only hearing who, what, where, I'm not learning the word cow, jump, farm.
Right.
I'm learning just the questions. So to teach your child that vocabulary, we have to comment on it and label it. And often what you'll find is if you start pointing out, oh, look, there's a cow. Look, there's the horse. Your child might say duck.
Yeah.
Because they realise, oh, we're in the rhythm of we're just telling each other what we can see. And they will probably do it on their own. You won't need to ask them. And if you go, oh, the cow goes moo, they're probably going to do it on their own.
Yeah.
But that example on the way home from school, really common. There's so much that's needed to be able to answer that question correctly.
Yeah.
What did you do today? Blimey, where do I start? What's the important thing for me to tell you? Let me organise my thoughts. At the moment, I'm really tired. I'm thinking about my rucksack on my back. There's my friend over there who I want to wave to.
Yeah.
There's so much sort of processing we have to do to be able to, as a child, answer that question correctly. And I think at that point, they're just too overwhelmed. And often you probably find that it's once you're back home, maybe they've had a little something to eat. They're in that place where they're able to kind of reflect on what they've done. They're able to answer those questions more easily. It's really common that lots of the children I work with find that really hard. It's very abstract to be able to answer what you've done in your day. So a way to help them with that is to take photos. I think obviously you can't do this at school, but take photos of the things that they're doing during their day. And then at the end of the day, you can kind of review the photos with them.
Yeah.
And depending on where they're at with their language, often I suggest to parents that you describe what's happening in the photo. So you're, again, modelling the type of thing you can say.
Yeah.
Wow, you were splashing in the puddles.
Okay.
And then you've given them the model of what they could say next time when they want to share something with you.
Yeah. Brilliant. And building on that, you get asked, what toys and games should I get to help my child's speech? There's so many toys and games out there.
Yeah.
So kind of going, what is it that we can narrow down that's really going to help?
I'm going to give a really annoying answer.
Now, go on.
It's whatever your child is interested in.
Really?
Which I think is really annoying. But what you can do is look for the commonality within whatever they're interested in, and try and kind of build on that. So if your child loves transport, they love bubbles, and they love balloons, I would say potentially there's a visual element to that. So maybe they're loving watching the wheel spin, maybe they're loving the bubbles kind of falling and the balloons in the air. So I would then think about, are there other visual toys that might be interesting for them? Because the main thing actually here is around kind of building the connection and you two having a great time together. It's there's not a magic bullet in terms of this toy is going to help them talk.
It's essentially the way you communicate while you're playing with whatever toy they're interested in.
That's it. That is it, which is annoying. There's not one thing. And anything that tells you this is going to revolutionise your child.
That's so important, because I think so often we fall into this thing of, I want to get this because this is going to fix the issue, fix the problem. And actually you're saying, forget about it. You don't need that.
And also, that mindset, they don't need to be fixed either. It's just about developing what they already have within them and expanding that. So it is. It's really just thinking about whatever they're into, and the best toy you can give them is you and your time. Which is hard, I think, when parents are stretched, but that's the truth.
I like this. So the third most asked question is, when should I get in touch with a professional?
So the first thing I would say is your gut instinct.
Yeah.
I think if you feel like something's not quite right and you're a little bit worried, trust that. I think parents have got great intuition. The kind of first things we always want to have checked are hearing. It's lots and lots of children have glue ear, need grommets, have an episode of fluid build up in the ear. It's really, really common just because of the anatomy of the ear as you're developing. So definitely getting a hearing test to make sure, rule that in or out. And if you are worried, make a referral to speech therapy. Speak to your GP or health visitor, but preschool, most NHS services run a open referral where you can refer directly into.
Can teachers refer?
Teachers can as well, yeah, and for older children too. But yeah, your nursery can refer, or your GP can, but you can also as well. And I think, yeah, if you are concerned, a couple of things to look for, as we spoke about before, is if your child is 2 and doesn't have 50 words, isn't putting 2 words together.
Yeah.
That's time to be kind of monitoring things and keeping a close eye on things. And at 3, we are expecting little sentences. So if you're not hearing those things, and also all those other areas, if your child is kind of avoiding other children or not really interacting with other children, that's another time to maybe have a think about that. Or if there's a big discrepancy between home and nursery, if your child is silent at nursery, definitely you want some help. It could be that they're feeling a bit anxious, a little bit worried. It might be that it's just really busy and overwhelming for them. It might be the pace of it is a bit difficult. Yeah. There could be some attention things going on there. Something needs a little bit of support so they can fully access everything that there is there.
Is it important that parents don't panic?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you think, oh gosh, they've got to speech therapy. You know, when I heard the word disorder with one of my kids, I was like, oh my God. Like, and for me, there was a sense of how did I miss that, you know? So is it important that parents realise that this is just support?
Yeah.
It is support. And even in those sessions, you know, my son, when he was going to speech therapy, he loved it. It's a chance to just go and play games with someone who's fully engaged with him on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't... Obviously, it's therapy, so it's different. But if you were told you could have another grown-up in your child's life who's going to have loads of fun with them, who they're going to love seeing, you wouldn't say no to that.
No.
And yeah, you're right. It is just support and championing what they're great at and supporting those things that are difficult for them. And 1 in 5 children need that bit of help. So it's actually quite normal to need that little bit of extra help.
Yeah. The other thing that we do, so that was your most asked questions, but now we actually asked the Happy Mum Happy Baby community to send in some questions. We picked our top 5.
Great.
Because there were so many. Because as you say, 1 in 5, it's a massive deal. So someone has said, when should we seek support from NHS SALT? Around us, they say after 3 at least. I guess that feeds into what we just sort of said.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. The NHS, obviously, we know is having a difficult time at the moment. The Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists are doing a vacancy survey at the moment, and there is over 20% vacancies in the NHS at the moment. So lots of services are really, really stretched. Yeah. I would say do the strategies that we spoke about today.
Yeah.
Keep a really close eye on everything that's going on with your child, and different services will see children at different ages.
And I guess it depends where you are in the country as well.
It does, which is frustrating and difficult. There might be an option for maybe a kind of like a little stay and play group or something like that. I would find out, is there anything else that is not speech therapy, but are members of staff who've been maybe trained by a speech and language therapist? Is there something else that you can access while you wait? Do all the things that we've spoken about. Get a hearing test to make sure that that's not in there as well. And then as soon as you can refer them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Another question is, 2.5-year-old says lots of words and forming short sentences, but pronunciation is terrible.
Yeah. So at this age, we're expecting lots and lots and lots of speech errors.
Right.
Yeah. So we spoke about before the backing disorder. So there are some errors that are atypical, which is a scary word, but atypical. Yeah. We're not expecting them in typical speech development. So moving sounds from the front of our mouth to the back of our mouth. Yeah. Just that backing error. However, so at 2.5, we're expecting lots and lots of errors. So please be reassured it's probably typical what your child is doing.
Yeah.
You as their parent should be able to understand them between 50 to 75% of the time. So you're a familiar listener. If you're not hitting that threshold, they've probably got more errors than we'd expect.
Right.
Hearing test again. Often they're so closely related. If we can't perceive the sounds, if we're essentially underwater, then it's going to be really hard for us to make the sound. So definitely get a hearing test. And I wouldn't be too worried if you're at that 50 to 75%. Just keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
It's only really at 3 onwards that we expect errors to start resolving. So things like the other way around, the k to go into the front of the mouth, which is a typical error. That error we expect that to be resolving a bit later. Or the like a f going to a t So saying tish instead of fish, for example.
Right.
Those areas we expect them to start resolving over time. But at 2.5, we're still expecting loads of those errors.
Do you think if you are sensing that something might be going on, do you think it's worth parents journaling or making a note of what they're observing?
Yes, that's really great. Another thing that's really helpful for us as therapists is any videos you've got.
Oh, really?
Because
they talk differently outside of the room than in the room.
Yeah, and they may not perform
Yeah.
in the assessment session with us. They may be completely silent because it's a new person and we're potentially in a room that looks like a doctor's office.
That must be really, well, I want to say frustrating, but obviously not because you're super calm. But when you are there to talk and to hear them talk and they're silent.
Yeah. I mean, we have loads and loads of tricks to be able to try and help children feel calm and confident and ready to go. But it does happen that sometimes they're just, and it might be that, you know, if they have had maybe a complex medical history, they've had loads of doctor's appointments, a grown up in a room that looks medical, I'm associating you with needles and pain. And so I don't trust you yet. So it can take time to build their trust with you. Okay. So any videos, definitely keep a note of the things that they're doing, the things that they're not doing. And then, videos are really, really helpful. Yeah.
Someone has asked, what's the best advice for raising bilingual children without confusing them too much? It's the old, I mean, I'm pretty sure I've heard this quite a lot, that bilingual children take a little while longer to speak. Is that right?
Yeah, so with bilingualism, I mean, firstly, what a gift you're giving your child.
Yes.
To have more than one language. That's incredible. What we typically see in children who are learning more than one language is their words are split across the languages. So that kind of 50 words is kind of the magic number for putting two words together. And so what we often see is you might have 50 words across multiple languages, so you're not yet combining words together. So it looks delayed, but it actually isn't delayed. Children just acquiring language in a slightly different way. The first thing is speak to your child in the language you are most confident in.
Right.
The reason for that is then you're going to be modelling all the lovely grammar and a sentence structure that is appropriate to that language, whereas it can get a bit jumbled. If you're speaking a language you're not as confident in, sometimes some of those things can get a bit jumbled. If you're confident, really confident in multiple languages, good on you, that's amazing. I'm quite jealous. But one thing you can do is attach different languages to different activities. So you always do bath time in French. You always do meal times in English. You can attach it to different times. And I think if I were thinking about that, I would be thinking, okay, what language do they need? I mean, for me, meal times with family would be, what is our family language that we're speaking? What language do their grandparents speak? What do I need them to be able to communicate with family? Maybe it's the stuff around kind of nursery and school routine. Maybe I have that in English if they're attending an English-speaking nursery.
I mean, you just think about their little brains. That's so much to observe, you know, to take on board. Yeah. I still find it fascinating now, like with my dad, who does speak, you know, he's fluent Italian. He's Italian and speaks English, but knowing what he's thinking in. So when you think about a child who is bilingual, you know, that thought process in their brain and everything, like what language is that occurring in?
What does he think in? Have you ever asked him?
Oh, he thinks I'm crazy for asking him, to be honest. But he's like, well, if I'm with someone English, it's English. I'm like, but what do you dream in? He's like, it baffles him, to be honest, as to why my brain goes there. Someone has asked, they've said, my 4-year-old has had his 4 NHS sessions, but I'm struggling to do it all the home exercises. Any tips? It's like we were talking about that kind of that pressure and then that guilt that you might feel for not being able to follow through with the work that you're being given.
Yeah, I speak to parents about this all the time. And actually, recently I've started having physio myself. Right. And so I'm going through the experience
doing your exercise
of trying to figure out how to put it into my routine. Oh gosh, this actually is a lot to try and add something extra in. My top tip is to try and attach it to a habit you already have. Right. So that becomes the cue for the homework. So for me, when I'm running a bath, I do my physio exercises. Right. So then it's already built into my routine. Yeah. So I think trying to find a habit which you can sneak it into is my top tip. But also speak to your therapist. I mean, really, that's what we're here for, to make it specific to your child. If your child loves being on the trampoline and there's a way that we can sneak it into them grabbing the cards they need off the top of the trampoline or modelling the vocabulary they need, speak to your therapist and ask them. But I would say, attach it to a habit and some things need to be done in a very specific way. So that's the question to ask. Does it need to be done in this specific way, or can we do it kind of on the walk somewhere?
Adapt it,
Yeah, because some things need focus and only focusing on that one thing, and other homework can be done sprinkled within other activities.
Yeah.
Does that help?
That does help. And finally, I want to read this one because I just feel for this woman, this person, massively. They have said, it feels like I've failed my little boy. He's nearly 3 and speaks like my mate's 1.5-year-old. Was it me?
No, I promise you it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. I mean, upsettingly, I am asked a version of this question all the time.
Really?
Yeah. There's nothing you as a parent have done that is making this hard for your child. There's nothing. It's not your fault at all. For some children, it's just hard.
Yeah.
And that's rubbish, but it's just hard for some children.
Yeah.
You haven't done anything. And the fact that you have sent this question in, you obviously care so much and want to do everything you can for your child. So be reassured that that in itself, you've got everything within you to support them in the best way you possibly can. And it's not your fault.
Thank you. We finished the podcast. We're there, Emma, with you completing 3 sentences.
Okay.
The first one is being a parent means.
Okay. I knew this question was coming because I've listened to your podcast.
Well done.
And I didn't feel equipped to answer this question because I'm not a parent. So what I did instead was I put it out to my community online.
Yeah.
And I asked them, and the answers they gave me were so varied that I feel like the answer is everything, all at once.
Yes, that's so good.
I feel like that is the summary of it was so wide-ranging.
Yeah. Okay. If I could tell you one thing, it would be?
It's not your fault. You're their greatest teacher, but it's not your fault.
Yeah. And I'm happy when?
When I have a moment with a parent when their child is doing something that we know is super special, that maybe someone else wouldn't know. And we have this moment where we look over the head of the child and we are sharing a, oh my God moment. That, I wish I could bottle it. It's incredible.
Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I've had speech therapy in my own life, my kids. It's a massive thing, and the confidence and support that you give children and people that need speech therapy is amazing.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.